All right, today we're ready to pick up in Genesis chapter 31 now. We went through, 29 and 30 last week. Jacob met Rachel, married Leah, then married Rachel, and father-in-law Laban threw in a couple of handmaids for assistant wives, so he ended up with 4 wives and started having kids with his first wife, Leah, and then one of his assistant wives, and then his other assistant wife, and he went back to Leah, and finally Rachel got in on the act, and she finally had a child named Joseph. And later on in chapter 35, she has another one, which was Benjamin, and that concluded the 12 sons of Jacob. So we got those taken care of. Now, we ended chapter 30 then with Jacob getting restless now. He's been here for 20 years, and basically he worked for his wives, and now he's wanting to work for himself and move out on his own, and so there's some double dealing, which he's a special at, in how you got these animals to breed the way they did, and he ended up with a pretty good flock and a pretty good herd. And chapter 31 is the account of Jacob striking out on his own, leaving father-in-law Laban, and in this chapter you have some interesting things. We'll pick up here in verse number 1, chapter 31. He heard the words of Laban's son, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's. That which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. In other words, Jacob has become very, very well off in his possessions. And of course, you got a lot of it by cheating. That's been Jacob. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban. Behold, it was not toward him as before. And the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers, to thy kindred, and I'll be with thee. In other words, God says it's time to go home. And so he called Rachel and Leah to the field and to his flock, and told them this. He said, I see your father's countenance is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. For as manipulating and scheming and deceitful and all that kind of stuff that he is, he still tries to give the impression that he's a very spiritual man. But God has been with me. And that with all my power I have served your father, and your father hath deceived me, changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. In other words, God protected me from your dad hurting me. If he said thus, the speckle shall be thy wages, all the cattle bear speckled. If he said the ring straight shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring straight. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. God did that. Jacob, of course, wouldn't have any hand in that. It came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived, I lifted up my eyes, saw in a dream, behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring straight, speckled, and grizzled. And the angel of God spake unto him in dreams, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. He said, Lift up now thine eyes, and see all the rams which sleep upon the cattle are ring straight, speckled, and grizzled, for I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. I am the God of Bethel. Remember, Bethel is what he called that pasture land where he laid out there with a rock for his pillow and had a dream about the ladder and everything. He woke and said, Surely the Lord is in this place, and I knew it not. And he called that place Bethel, which simply means the house of God. And here the Lord says, I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest a pillar, where thou vowedest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. In other words, go home. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not counted of him strangers? For he has sold us and hath quite devoured also our money. In other words, is dad going to give us anything? Kind of like the prodigal boy. Give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. But now they're asking, is there any portion of goods from dad that falls to us? All the riches which God has taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God has said unto thee, do. So Jacob rose up, set his sons and his wives upon camels, carried away all his cattle, all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Padan Aram, to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. Laban went to shear his sheep. Rachel had stolen the images that were her father. This is the first time we have the word images mentioned in the Bible. And I would assume that there was images worshipped before this, but this is the first use of the word. And so you don't have any reference to that in the first 9 chapters, all the way through the flood. You don't have any mentions of people worshiping images. People pretty much were, the fancy term is monotheists. They believed in one God. And then later on, they were what is called polytheists, which is many gods. But even when they believed in many gods, they still believed that there was one main God, or one head God, God of gods. And then you follow the decline from that point. When they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful. It became vain in their imagination. The whole decline of civilization in Romans chapter number 1. But it all started with the fact that they did have one God, and they did believe in one God, and that's been all downhill from then. All right, so much for the evolutionary proposal that things are getting better and better and better and better. They're getting worser and worser and worser. Rachel stole the images that were her father's. Now it's a pretty good statement and give you a little insight into the folly and the stupidity and the silliness of worshiping images, whether it's in the form of a little statue or whatever it is. But this image that either is a god or represents a god to its worshipers, which apparently Laban was. I mean, he was not a Jew. He was a Syrian. But how big of a God would that be? How satisfied would you be with your God if your God could be stolen? Could somebody steal your God? And aren't you glad the answer to that, obviously, is a resounding, absolutely, positively, no way in this world of God's creation could anybody steal God. But she had stolen the images that were her father's. Now, what that says about Rachel, that comes into question now. Did she steal them because she's a thief and she's wants everything that Dad has, including his images? Is this something she stole because she's going to swap it at a swap meet, barter with it, turn it into money? If it's gold or silver, I don't know what it was. Well, it tells one thing about her: she's a thief. And it suggests maybe she stole it so she could worship it. Again, she wasn't a Jew. But she stole the images that were her father's. Now, Jacob did not know that she did that. Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, and that he told him not that he fled. In other words, he packed up and moved out in the middle of the night while Laban, I don't know if it's the middle of the night necessarily, but it's while Laban is not home. He's away shearing his sheep. He told Laban not that he fled. So he fled with all that he had. Verse 21, he rose up, passed over the river, and set his face toward Mount Gilead. And it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob was fled. Jacob left home, took all of his family, which is your daughters and your grandchildren. He took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey. They overtook him, as in Laban and his men did. God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said to him, "Take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad." In other words, don't threaten him and don't flatter him. Don't pat him on the back and don't hit him in the mouth. So, 25, Laban overtook Jacob. Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountain. Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done? That thou hast stolen away unawares to me, carried away my daughters as captives, taken with the swords, just like you kidnapped them. Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly, steal away from me? Didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth and with songs, with tabret and harp? We could have had a big party, a big going away party for you. Hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing. And then Laban says to him, it's in the power of my hand to do you hurt. But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight. See, that's the God of Jacob's father, but not the God of Laban's father. The God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now, though thou wouldst needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, he says, okay, I can understand you want to go home. You want to go back to your father's house. Yet, he says, wherefore hast thou stolen my goods? My gods, not goods, gods. Why have you done that? I mean, leaving is one thing. Going back to your family, I understand. But I don't get it. Why have you stolen my gods? And Jacob answered and said to them, because I was afraid. For I said, peradventure thou wouldst take by force thy daughters from me. In other words, I had to steal away secretly, because if I came to you and talked to you about it, you'd have said, nope, you can go, but you can't take my girls with me. And you'd take by force thy daughters from me. And then he said this, Jacob did to Laban, with whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Jacob did not know that his favorite wife had stolen those images. And Jacob apparently is of the mindset, that's a nasty thing to do. They ought to die. Let them not live. Before our brethren, discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. I don't know if that means that he didn't know she was a thief, or if that means he didn't know that she loved idols, or if he didn't know that she's just like him. She's got something up her sleeve besides her arm. Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, into the two maidservants' tents, but he found them not. Then he went out of Leah's tent, entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them into camel's furniture and sat upon them. Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. She said to her father, let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. She was hiding them and sitting on them. So he didn't find them. Jacob was wroth. He's partly mad because Laban has accused him of stealing those, and then he searches everybody's tent and stuff, can't find them. See, we didn't steal them. So he's mad because of what looks like a false accusation. And he's partly mad because Laban even chased him down. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? How come you chase me like a dog? Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Did you find any of your stuff in my stuff? I didn't take your stuff. Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren. Let they may judge betwixt us both. I didn't take anything of yours. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it myself. You know, I didn't take it out of your flock. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was. In the day the drought consumed me, the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle. I have changed my wages 10 times. And He said, verse 42, except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hast sent me away now empty. If it wasn't for God, you'd have just kicked me out, give me nothing. God has seen mine affliction and the labor of my hands and rebuked thee yesternight. So Jacob is still playing the spiritual card, even though he's been manipulating and cheating and everything else for those 20 years. And Laban answered and said to Jacob, verse 43, these daughters are my daughters. These children are my children. These cattle are my cattle. All that thou seest is mine. What can I do this day unto these my daughters or unto their children which they have borne? Now therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou. Let it be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. And Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. And Laban called it Jegarsa-Hadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Gilead. And Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. I preached about that statement a few Sunday nights ago. This is one of those statements, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. I remember several years ago, it was a very popular item. They would make it in the form of a little necklace, a heart-shaped thing, a little charm or whatever you call it, that you hang on a little chain, put around your neck. And it was a jagged, broken-in heart, half of a heart. And the boy would get one half, and the girl would get the other half. And it would say, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. It's supposed to be a romantic thing. What this is a thing that Jacob and Laban agreed upon because neither one of them trusted the other. They were both mad at each other. They didn't trust each other. They were both finaglers and schemers, and they didn't trust each other any further than they could throw them. They didn't trust them out of their sight. And that's the point of that statement. So when a love-struck couple uses that statement, I understand the sentiment, but the setting and the context of that statement is, I don't trust you. If I can't see you, I don't trust you. And so the Lord watch over you when I can't. But I don't trust you and you don't trust me. Some marriages, I guess that probably would be appropriate, but not a good scriptural marriage. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day, verse 48. Therefore is the name of it called Gilead, and Mizpah, he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. And Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be witness, and this pillar be witness. I will not pass over this heap to thee. Thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. I won't come, I won't attack you, you don't attack me. And so, again, this has hints about things to come yet between Jews and the non-Jews and all that kind of stuff. Verse 53, the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judged betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount and called his brethren to eat bread. And they did eat bread, tarried all night in the mount. Early in the morning, Laban rose up, kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them. And Laban departed, returned unto his place. And so they went their separate ways with this agreement. I don't trust you. I'm going to ask God to watch over you and keep his eye on you because I can't. All righty? That brings us to chapter 32. Chapter 32 is where Jacob becomes Israel. Jacob, again, the name means supplanter and schemer and deceiver and all that kind of stuff. Manipulator, string puller, doing everything that he can, taking everything into his own hands to get what he wants, to get his own way. In chapter 32, his name is changed to Israel. And that's where we get the name of the nation and the 12 boys as the 12 tribes and so forth. But Israel is the name of Jacob. Israel means, for as a prince has to have power with God and thus power with men. And Jacob becomes a very powerful figure then in history as he becomes Israel. So here's how it happens. Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him in chapter 32. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Mahanaim means, the word means 2 armed camps. And so he's got one to deal with Laban, who he doesn't trust, and one to deal with Esau, which, after all these years, 20 years, you're going to have to deal with him now. Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother. The last word he heard from Esau is, "I am going to kill you." And that's the reason that he left home in the first place. Because Jacob stole Esau's, as the firstborn, the eldest, stole his blessing by lying and deceiving his dad. He didn't need to do that. God had already said he was going to get it, and he didn't have to cheat and pull strings and manipulate everybody to get it. So 20 years later, Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. Edom is Esau. If you ever see the word Edom, which you will several times in the Bible, the Edom and the Edomites, Edom is Esau. Chapter 36, verse 1 tells you that in plain, simple language. In verse 4, he commanded them, saying, "Thus shall you speak unto my lord Esau, thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now, and I have," in other words, I've been with Uncle Laban. I've been with not only my uncle, but Esau's uncle too. This was their mother Rebekah's brother. "I have oxen, and asses, flocks, and men servants, women servants, and I have sent to tell my lord," he's addressing that to Esau, "that I may find grace in thy sight." I'm very rich right now, in other words. And I just want to tell you so I can find grace in your sight. And the messengers returned to Jacob saying, this is exciting news. They say, "We came to thy brother Esau, and guess what? He's coming to meet thee, and 400 men with him." Ooh, now, you know what Jacob's thinking. He's not coming for reconciliation. He's not coming for a little peace concord here. Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, verse 7 says. Again, the last thing he heard from this guy was, "I am going to kill you." And so he thinks, well, 20 years, I've dodged it, now it's time. And so he divided the people that was with him and the flocks and herds and the camels into 2 bands. And here's Jacob, taking things into his own hands, figuring out how to do this, figuring out how to handle it. And he said, verse 8, "If Esau come to the one company and smite that company," and he assumes that's what he's going to do, "then the other company which is left shall escape." So now he's got to decide, now who do I want in this company, who do I want in this company? Because if he attacks this one and kills all them, at least I'll still have these. Now which one does he want to have? Which one is he more willing for him to attack first? Verse 9, Jacob said, "Oh, God of my father," now he's praying. "God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidst unto me, return into thy country." And God did tell him that back in chapter 31, we noted. "And to thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I'm not worthy of the least of all the nations." He's getting himself in a position where God just might do something for him. Something that he can't do himself. "I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become 2 bands." So you got, in other words, 2 groups of people of all of his family and servants and stuff, because he separated them just so some of them can survive when Esau comes and kills out the other bunch. He says, verse 11, deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he'll come and smite me and the mother with the children. And thou saidest, I will surely do thee good and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. You said that, God, so please don't let him kill off my children with their mothers. And he lodged there that same night, took of that which came to his hand, a present for Esau his brother. He's going to buy him off. 200 she-goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milch camels with their colts, 40 kine, and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses, 10 foals. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves. Said unto his servants, pass over before me, put a space betwixt drove and drove. In other words, leave some room between these groups. He commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Now, who is all this people, and what is all this stuff? Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau. Behold, also he's behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the drove, saying, on this manner shall you speak unto Esau when you find him. Tell him, we got presents for him. This is all for you, all this livestock. And say ye moreover, verse 20, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us, for he said, I will appease him. So he's still working everything out, figuring out this is what he's got to do. He doesn't have any idea that God apparently has done something in Esau's heart. Esau's not near as angry and murderous as he was the last time Jacob saw him. But Jacob doesn't know that. He said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before him, and afterward I'll see his face. Peradventure, he will accept of me. In other words, maybe he will accept it from me and be gracious. Maybe he won't. So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. He rose up that night, took his 2 wives, his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. And he was left alone on the other side of the brook. Verse 24, here's the time when Jacob becomes Israel. Jacob was left alone. There wrestled a man with him until the breaking of the day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, the man that he was wrestling with, he touched the hollow of his thigh, and the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, the guy that Jacob was wrestling with, let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. Jacob is brought to a point of blessability. I'll use that word. He's not the high and mighty Jacob that can manipulate and get whatever he wants. He is hanging on for dear life now. This man that he's wrestling with is God. This is a great, great picture. And he said unto him, the man he's wrestling with said unto Jacob, what is thy name? And he said, Jacob. That's more than just introducing himself. When God said, what is thy name? He's saying, who are you? His name is, his name is what he's known for and as. And when he said, my name is Jacob, what he's doing is making a confession. I am a deceiver, a schemer, manipulator. I pull strings. I'm a supplanter. I'm a cheater. I'm a liar. I'm Jacob. That's who Jacob is. That's what Jacob means. That's his name. That's what he is known by and for. In verse 28, he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel, for as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. Now, Israel is upon the scene. Now we have a new name for Jacob. We have a new nature for Jacob. Now here's something really, really important. We'll see it in the next chapter, and even a little bit in the rest of this one in a minute. Jacob has the nature of Israel as God changes his name to a prince with a prince that has power with God and with men. But Jacob also still has Jacob's nature. This is a good picture of a believer on Christ. We have a brand new nature. We're a new creature in Christ. We have what is called a new man, a new nature. But alas, we also have the old man and the old nature. And sometimes what shows up in our life is the new man. Sometimes what shows up in our life is the old man. And we'll see that illustrated in the life of Jacob here for another chapter or two. In chapter 35, God sends him back again to Bethel, and he reminds him again, you're not Jacob, you're Israel. And God has to do that with his people on a pretty regular basis. I would say that's one of the main reasons for church. God brings his people to the house of God, lets them hear the word of God to remind them, you're not Jacob, you're Israel. You're not the old man, you're the new man. Walk accordingly. And so he said, thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. Jacob asked him and said, tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face. That's who he's been wrestling with. My life is preserved. He wrestled with God. You ever wrestle with God? I imagine you have. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Remember, God had touched the hollow of his thigh, and it was out of joint. And it remained out of joint. And Jacob hobbled and limped on that out of joint hip for the rest of his life. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. And Jacob is given that crippling thing of the old man to remind him that he wrestled with God. And while in the wrestling match, per se, you might say he lost, in the scheme of things, he won. And he became Israel instead of Jacob. Now, next week, Lord willing, we'll get into chapter 33, and this meeting then that actually happened between Israel, or Jacob, and Esau. Not what Jacob was expecting. We'll cover that, Lord willing, next week. We might even get into chapter 34, interesting story about the one daughter mentioned in the Bible, a girl by the name of Dinah. There's some interesting things there. We might get there too. Let's pray. It's time for church. Dear Lord.